The Galactic Senate chamber hung in the silent void above Virelli's prime, a moon wrapped in silver clouds and humming with the energy of 300 alien civilizations. Its dome, made of living crystal that shifted color with the mood of the assembly, glowed a cold blue that morning. Inside, delegates in robes of woven light, armored carapaces, or simple fabric sat in tiered rings around a central dais. The air smelled faintly of ozone and old incense. Every species present had sent their best speakers, their sharpest minds for this final session. The matter before them was simple on paper: whether to grant Earth full membership in the Galactic Senate. For over a decade, Earth had petitioned for this. Humanity had sent data packets filled with art, music, scientific breakthroughs, and historical records. They had opened their orbital stations to inspection, shared clean energy schematics, and even rescued stranded alien freighters near the Kuiper Belt. But suspicion clung to them like static. Earth was young, barely 2 centuries into spaceflight. Their history was stained with wars, pollution, and internal divisions. To many in the Senate, humans were impulsive, emotional, and dangerously unpredictable. At the heart of the opposition stood Senator Kale Vor of the Zenthar Dominion. Tall, with obsidian skin and eyes like polished onyx, Vor had spent weeks rallying votes against Earth's admission. He spoke often of planetary instability and uncontrolled technological acceleration. In private meetings, he called humans children playing with fusion fire. His influence was vast. The Zenthar controlled key trade lanes and supplied half the Senate's quantum processors. Few dared cross him. In the human delegation's small observation booth near the back, Daniel Hart watched the chamber with quiet intensity. He wasn't a politician by training, once a naval officer, then a diplomat by necessity. His uniform was plain gray, unadorned with medals or rank insignia. Beside him sat Lisa Moore, Earth's communications liaison. She tapped softly on a wrist console, monitoring the live feed back to Sol System. Her dark hair was pulled into a tight bun, but a few strands had escaped, framing a face tight with worry. "They're going to say no," she whispered, not taking her eyes off the main floor. Daniel didn't answer right away. He watched as Senator Vor rose to speak one last time before the vote. The chamber fell silent. Even the ambient hum of translation fields seemed to dim. "Honored delegates," Vor began, his voice deep and resonant, amplified by the acoustics of the dome. "We stand at a crossroads. Grant Earth membership and we invite chaos into our halls. Deny it, and we uphold the standards that have kept this alliance stable for millennia. Earth has potential, yes, but potential is not readiness. Their world still burns with old hatreds. Their leaders still speak in threats. Their children still die from diseases we eradicated before your ancestors walked upright." A ripple of agreement moved through the crowd. Some nodded. Others shifted in their seats, already convinced. Lisa's fingers tightened on her console. "He's twisting everything," she said, voice low. "We've cut carbon emissions by 90%. We've unified under one planetary council. We even gave up nuclear weapons decades ago." Daniel finally spoke, his voice calm. "Truth doesn't always win in rooms like this. Power does." Below, the voting began. Each delegate activated a small orb at their seat. Blue meant yes. Red meant no. One by one, the lights flickered to life. Blues appeared here and there, mostly from newer colonies or species that had benefited from Earth's aid. But the reds came faster, thicker, spreading like a stain across the chamber's visual tally. When the final count appeared in the air above the dais, it read, 168 in favor, 172 opposed. Earth's petition was denied. A murmur rose, some in relief, others in disappointment. Senator Vor allowed himself a small, satisfied nod. In the human booth, Lisa closed her eyes. Her shoulders slumped. But Daniel didn't move. He simply watched the numbers hover in the air, then slowly fade. There was no anger in his face, no shock. Only something deeper, something like understanding. He stood. "Let's go." Lisa looked up at him, confused. "That's it? We just leave?" "We've done what we came to do," he said, already moving toward the exit. Back aboard the Odyssey, their modest diplomatic vessel docked in the Senate's neutral bay. The mood was heavy. The ship was small by galactic standards. No grand corridors or holographic lounges. Just functional metal walls, humming life support, and a bridge barely large enough for 4 people. The crew of 12 waited in silence as Daniel and Lisa stepped inside. "Seal the hatch," Daniel ordered. The heavy door hissed shut behind them. He walked straight to the command chair and sat. Lisa followed, taking her station at communications. "Send it," he said. Lisa hesitated only a second before tapping a sequence into her console. A single encrypted pulse less than a nanosecond long shot out from the Odyssey's primary antenna. It wasn't aimed at Earth. It was aimed at thousands of hidden relays scattered across human-occupied space, on mining stations, research outposts, freighter hulls, even old lunar satellites. The signal carried no words, no demands, just a code. Aurora initiated. Across the galaxy, humans who had spent years pretending to be ordinary citizens, engineers, pilots, medics, teachers, felt a quiet chime in their earpieces or saw a single line of text flash on their screens. They didn't speak. They didn't celebrate. They simply stopped what they were doing and began preparing. On the bridge of the Odyssey, Daniel stared out the viewport at the Senate moon below. Its lights glittered like distant stars. He thought of Earth, of green hills under a blue sky, of children learning in classrooms, of cities that once fought but now worked together. They hadn't asked for war. They'd asked for a chance, and the Senate had laughed. Now the galaxy would learn what happened when you told humanity no one too many times. Lisa turned to him. "What do we do now?" Daniel leaned back, his expression unreadable. "We go home. And we wait." The Odyssey detached from the docking arm and drifted silently into the black. Behind it, the Senate continued its debates, unaware that the real decision had already been made. Not in a chamber of crystalline light, but in the hearts of a species that had survived ice ages, plagues, and its own worst instincts. Earth hadn't needed the Senate's permission to be great. It only needed the Senate's mistake to prove it. Across the galaxy, the signal spread like a whisper through the dark. It reached places the Galactic Senate had long forgotten. Outposts clinging to asteroids, research stations buried in icy moons, freighters hauling ore between dead stars. Humans heard it not as a command but as a promise. The promise that they were not alone, and that their quiet work had meaning. On the edge of the Proxima Centauri asteroid belt, Jake Ellis floated inside the cramped cockpit of his mining rig Rust Bucket. He was 32, with grease-stained hands and a faded tattoo of Earth's continents on his forearm. For 5 years he had pretended to be nothing more than a lone prospector, scanning rocks for rare metals, but hidden beneath layers of false hull plating was something else. A quantum relay core, built from Earth's last generation of stealth tech. When the signal came, Jake didn't flinch. He simply powered down his mining lasers, wiped his logs, and uploaded a new protocol into the rig's navigation system. The Rust Bucket shuddered as dormant systems hummed to life. Its thrusters fired in a silent burst, turning it away from the belt and toward a pre-programmed rendezvous point near Neptune's orbit. Jake smiled faintly. "Time to go home," he said to no one. Farther out, on the terraformed plains of New Oregon, a human colony the Senate barely acknowledged, Maya Ruiz stood in the hangar of a dusty airfield. She had spent the last 3 years flying supply runs in an old atmospheric skimmer, delivering medicine to remote farms. Her flight suit was patched in 3 places, and her boots were scuffed from years of hard landings. But beneath the humble exterior, her skimmer carried a modified ion drive and a cloaking field generator disguised as a weather sensor. When the chime sounded in her earpiece, she didn't hesitate. She climbed into the cockpit, ran a quick diagnostic, and lifted off. The skimmer shot through the pink-orange sky, leaving a trail of dust behind. Her destination wasn't listed on any public map. It was a hidden orbital dock near Jupiter where bigger things waited. Back in the Sol system, near the far side of the moon, retired Admiral Frank Dawson stood in a control room buried deep inside an old lunar base. The walls were lined with screens showing shipyards that looked abandoned. Rusted scaffolds, empty berths, silent cranes. But Frank knew better. For the past decade, under the guise of historical preservation, Earth had been rebuilding its fleet in secret, not with brute force but with elegance. The ships weren't built for destruction. They were built for presence, for showing up where no one expected them, moving faster than physics should allow and vanishing just as quickly. Project Aegis was ready. Frank pressed a single button on his console. Lights flickered across the shipyards. Hatches opened. Power flooded dormant reactors. One by one, sleek vessels with smooth, dark hulls began to drift free of their cradles. They had no names, only designations. But their purpose was clear. On Varelli's prime, none of this was visible. The Senate celebrated its decision as a victory for order. Senator Cale Vore gave interviews praising the wisdom of the assembly. He called Earth's silence after the vote a sign of their maturity. He didn't know that silence was the loudest sound humans could make. Meanwhile, aboard the Odyssey, Daniel Hart and Lisa Moore traveled through quiet space. They avoided major lanes, sticking to the shadowed edges of star systems. Lisa monitored encrypted channels, watching as hundreds of small acknowledgments trickled in, confirmations that the recall had been received. Each one was a heartbeat from the human network, scattered but strong. "They're all moving," Lisa said one evening, her voice soft. "Jake's en route. Maya's cleared New Oregon's atmosphere. Frank's activated the yards," Daniel nodded. He was studying a star map on his screen, tracing paths that would soon converge. "They didn't just vote against Earth," he said. "They voted against every human who ever fixed a broken ship, taught a child to read, or shared their last meal with a stranger. They think we're weak because we ask nicely. They'll learn we're strong because we build." Lisa looked at him. "Do you think they'll understand?" "Not at first," he said. "But they will." Back on Earth, cities prepared without panic. In Chicago, power grids rerouted energy to shield generators. In Nairobi, engineers tested new atmospheric filters. In Sydney, schools held quiet drills, not for war but for coordination. Families received simple messages on their home screens. "Stay calm. Trust your neighbors. Help is coming." There were no sirens, no broadcasts of fear, just quiet readiness. The Senate assumed Earth would sulk, maybe send another petition in a few decades. They didn't realize that humanity had never truly needed their approval. While alien diplomats debated rules and rituals, humans had been doing what they always did, solving problems, connecting dots, turning scraps into solutions. Their greatest weapon wasn't a weapon at all. It was the ability to work together when it mattered most. In a hidden lab beneath the Andes, a team of scientists activated the final piece of the plan, a network of microsatellites designed not to spy, but to listen. These tiny devices could detect the unique energy signature of any Senate vessel within 10 light years. They didn't attack. They simply watched, and reported on Mars. Colonists sealed their domes and powered up emergency reactors. On Titan, ice miners loaded cargo pods with medical supplies and spare parts. Every human outpost, no matter how small, became part of a single, silent machine. The galaxy thought humanity was scattered, divided, insignificant. But distance had never stopped humans from caring about each other. A miner on Proxima, a pilot on New Oregon, a teacher in Mumbai, they were all part of the same story. And that story was about to change. As the Odyssey neared the edge of Sol system, Lisa received a final confirmation. All key personnel were in position. All systems were green. Project Aegis was no longer a secret. It was a reality. Daniel stood from his chair and walked to the viewport. Earth hung in the distance, a blue marble wrapped in white clouds. He remembered his childhood there, running through fields, watching stars fall on summer nights. He had loved that world long before it meant anything to the galaxy. Now the galaxy would see it too. "We're not asking for a seat anymore," he said quietly. Lisa joined him at the window. "What are we doing then?" "We're showing them what happens when you tell a whole planet no." And with that, the Odyssey turned toward home, not as a defeated ship, but as the first note in a song the Senate had never heard before. A song of unity, quiet strength, and the unshakable belief that even the smallest voice, when joined with others, can shake the stars. The Senate thought the matter was closed. On Varelli's prime, life returned to its usual rhythm. Delegates filed new trade proposals, debated resource allocations, and attended ceremonial feasts under the twin suns. Senator Cale Vore gave a speech praising the wisdom of restraint, calling Earth's quiet withdrawal a sign of their growing maturity. He did not notice the human liaison, Chris Bell, standing quietly at the edge of the hall, eyes down, hands folded. Chris had spent 7 years inside the Senate bureaucracy, filing reports, translating documents, and smiling politely at condescending remarks. No one suspected he was anything more than a low-level aide. They never saw the encrypted logs he sent each night, or the way he memorized patrol routes, security codes, and emergency protocols. Now his real work began. Back in the Sol system, Earth held its breath, but not in fear. Cities dimmed their lights not to hide, but to save power for what was coming. In Tokyo, engineers rerouted energy from neon signs to shield emitters hidden beneath parks. In Rio, schools ran quiet drills where children practiced calm coordination, not panic. In Cairo, farmers checked their hydroponic fields twice a day, ensuring food supplies stayed strong. There was no chaos, no shouting in the streets, just a deep, steady focus like a runner before a race. Aboard the Odyssey, now docked in a hidden bay beneath the lunar surface, Daniel Hart met with Frank Dawson. The old admiral had aged since his days commanding Earth's first deep space fleet, but his eyes were sharp, his posture straight. They stood before a holographic display showing the positions of every human vessel now in motion. Dozens of dots glowed across the map, some near Jupiter, others near the Oort cloud, a few already slipping into quantum slipstream toward key Senate worlds. They still think we're begging, Frank said, crossing his arms. They have no idea what we've built, Daniel nodded. We're not here to fight. We're here to show them what unity looks like. Lisa Moore entered the room holding a data pad. All civilian networks are secure. Every colony has received the final instructions. No one's broadcasting. No one's talking. We're invisible. Good, Daniel said. Let them wonder. On New Oregon, Maya Ruiz landed her skimmer at a remote airfield. She was met by two other pilots, Lena Cho and Omar Hayes, who had also answered the call. They didn't speak much. They just nodded, checked each other's gear, and walked toward a waiting transport shuttle. Inside, the shuttle wasn't carrying passengers. It carried something far more valuable. A prototype field generator that could disrupt alien comms without harming living beings. It was small, no bigger than a suitcase, but it had taken Earth's best minds 5 years to perfect. Now it would be placed near Senate relay stations, not to destroy, but to pause, to make the galaxy listen. Far out in the asteroid belt, Jake Ellis guided the rust bucket into a narrow canyon on a dead moon. Hidden inside the canyon was a maintenance drone, sleek and silent. Jake transferred the quantum core from his rig into the drone's belly. Then he sent it on its way. The drone would drift toward the Senate's main sensor array near Varelli's Prime. It wouldn't explode. It would simply emit a low-frequency pulse that would gently shut down the array's processors, like putting a machine to sleep. No damage. Just silence. Chris Bell, still on Varelli's Prime, used his access badge to enter a restricted maintenance corridor beneath the Senate dome. He moved quickly, his footsteps echoing in the empty hall. At a junction box marked with Zenthar symbols, he inserted a small device no larger than a coin. It looked like a standard diagnostic tool, but it carried a virus written in human code, designed not to corrupt, but to delay. For exactly 12 hours, any emergency alert from the dome's core systems would be rerouted through a loop, buying Earth precious time. No one saw him. No one suspected. Back on Earth, families gathered for meals as usual. Parents told stories. Children did homework. But beneath the surface, everyone knew something was coming. Not because they were told to be afraid, but because they trusted each other. A neighbor might offer extra power from their solar roof. A teacher might stay late to help students understand emergency signals. A doctor might double-check medical supplies. It wasn't heroism, it was habit. Humanity had survived ice ages, plagues, and wars by helping each other. This was no different. In orbit, the first of Earth's hidden ships emerged from its camouflage shell. It was called Vigil, though its name wasn't broadcast. Its hull was matte black, shaped like a teardrop with no visible weapons. Inside, a crew of 6 monitored systems with calm focus. Their mission wasn't to attack. It was to appear suddenly silently near a Senate patrol route and hold position. Just long enough to be seen. Just long enough to make them ask, how did they get there? More ships followed. Warden near Alpha Centauri. Sentinel by the Helix Nebula. Keeper along the trade lane to Zenthar space. None fired a shot. None sent a threat. They simply existed where the Senate thought humans couldn't reach. Senator Vore finally received a report. A minor anomaly near a sensor outpost. He dismissed it as a glitch. Humans don't have that kind of range, he told his staff. They're still licking their wounds, but the reports kept coming. A freighter claimed it saw a human vessel vanish in a flash of light. A patrol drone lost contact for 3 minutes near Mars. A Senate comm relay went quiet for no reason. Each incident was small, explainable. But together, they formed a pattern, and patterns made even the proudest minds uneasy. Chris Bell watched the growing tension from the shadows. He saw delegates whispering in corners. He saw security teams double their patrols. He knew the moment was close. On the moon, Daniel stood alone in the observation deck looking at Earth. It glowed softly in the black calm and whole. He thought of all the people down there, millions, billions who had chosen trust over fear, who had built instead of burned, who had waited not with anger but with patience. They wanted to test us, he said to no one. Now they'll see what we're made of. And as the first human ship slipped into position above Varelli's prime, silent and unseen, the galaxy held its breath, not knowing that the real demonstration was about to begin. Not with fire, but with stillness. Not with words, but with presence. And in that stillness, the Senate would finally understand. Humanity had never needed their permission to belong. They had always belonged, to each other, to the stars, and to the future they were about to claim. It began not with fire, but with silence. One by one, the Senate's long-range sensor arrays went dark. Not in bursts of flame or shattered metal, but in quiet, orderly shutdowns, as if each machine had simply decided to rest. On Varelli's prime, technicians stared at blank screens, tapping controls that no longer responded. Alarms did not sound. Emergency lights did not flash. The systems just stopped, like clocks winding down at the same hour. At first, they thought it was a solar flare, then a software glitch. But when the third array fell silent, panic started to stir. Senator Cale Vore demanded answers. His voice echoed through the command center beneath the Senate dome, sharp and impatient. Who did this? Was it the Krell? The Vexari? No one knew. The logs showed no intrusion, no energy spikes, no foreign signals. Just a soft pulse, so faint it had been mistaken for background noise. And then nothing. While Vore raged, Chris Bell moved through the lower corridors unnoticed. He had already planted the last of his devices. Now he simply watched. He saw the confusion grow, the confidence crack. The Senate had always believed their technology was untouchable. Now something had touched it and left no trace. Then came the next phase. Across the galaxy, every major Senate world found its orbital traffic frozen. Freighters hung motionless in docking lanes. Patrol ships drifted without power. Even the great carrier Zenthar's Will, pride of the Dominion fleet, sat dead in space above its home moon. But no weapons had fired. No shields had collapsed. The ships were fine, engines warm, crews unharmed. They simply could not move. Humanity had not hacked their systems. They had outsmarted them. Hidden within civilian data streams over the past decade, Earth had seeded harmless-looking updates into public navigation protocols, tiny lines of code that looked like routine patches. Now activated by a single command, those lines synchronized across every non-human vessel using Senate standard software. The result was not destruction but stillness, a pause, a breath held across 1,000 worlds. On Varelli's prime, chaos erupted. Delegates shouted over each other. Security forces scrambled. Vore's face turned dark with fury and fear. This is an act of war, he declared, though no shot had been fired. Then the message came. It played on every channel, audio only, no image, no origin point. Just a calm, clear human voice speaking in the common tongue. You judged us by our past. We will show you our future. The voice belonged to Daniel Hart. It lasted only 8 seconds. Then silence returned. But the silence was broken moments later by something far more unsettling. Above Varelli's prime, space rippled. Not with explosions, but with light bending in impossible ways. One by one, human ships emerged from quantum slipstream. Not dozens, but hundreds. They appeared in perfect formation, encircling the moon in a vast silent ring. Their hulls were smooth, dark, and unmarked. They carried no visible weapons. They did not power up shields or target scanners. They simply hung there, still as stars. On the surface, crowds gathered in the streets, staring up in awe and terror. Some thought it was an invasion. Others thought it was a miracle. But the truth was simpler. This was a demonstration. From Alpha Centauri to the Helix Nebula, the same scene unfolded. Human vessels appeared near Senate hubs, shipyards, and relay stations. Not to attack, Not to threaten, just to be seen. Their formations were precise, geometric patterns that shifted slowly like living constellations. Each movement was coordinated across light years, yet perfectly timed. No other species in the galaxy could match that level of unity. Aboard the Odyssey, now stationed just beyond lunar orbit, Lisa Moore monitored the galaxy-wide response. "They're broadcasting panic," she said. "Every Senate world is calling for emergency sessions." Daniel stood beside her, arms crossed. "Good. Let them feel what it's like to be watched." Back on Earth, people watched the live feeds in quiet homes and public squares. There were no cheers, no chants of victory, just a deep shared understanding. This wasn't about revenge. It was about respect. On New Oregon, Maya Ruiz stood on a hilltop looking up at the sky. She knew her small team's work had helped make this possible. The field generator they'd placed near a relay station had disrupted Senate comms just long enough for the fleet to appear undetected. She felt no pride, only relief that it had worked. In the asteroid belt, Jake Ellis powered down the rust bucket and opened a ration pack. He watched the news on a small screen. When he saw the human fleet surrounding Varelli's Prime, he smiled and whispered, "About time." Senator Vore, now pacing in his private chamber, received a direct hail. It was untraceable, encrypted, and addressed only to him. Against his better judgment, he accepted. The screen lit up, not with a face, but with a simple message. "We do not want your war. We want your attention." Below it, coordinates. A meeting point in neutral space. No weapons allowed. One representative from Earth, one from the Senate. Vore wanted to refuse, but he looked out his window and saw the silent ring of human ships still holding position. He thought of the frozen fleets, the darkened sensors, the calm voice that had spoken across the stars. For the first time, he felt small. He accepted the coordinates. Across the galaxy, the human fleet did not move. They waited, not as conquerors, but as witnesses. They had shown the Senate that humanity could reach anywhere, disable anything, and appear anywhere, without firing a single shot. They had proven that their greatest strength was not in what they could destroy, but in what they could build, coordinate, and protect. And now, the Senate had a choice: continue to see humans as children or finally see them as equals. On Earth, Frank Dawson stood on a balcony in Geneva, watching the sunrise. He knew the hardest part was over. The demonstration had worked. Now came the real test, whether the galaxy could learn. Lisa's voice came through his earpiece. "They've accepted the meeting," Frank nodded. "Then it's time to talk." But everyone knew the talking had already begun, not with words, but with silence, precision, and the quiet courage of a species that had been told no one too many times. And this time the galaxy was listening. The Senate reconvened not in pride, but in humility. The great crystalline dome above Varelli's Prime no longer glowed blue with certainty, but pulsed a soft, uncertain amber. Delegates filed in quietly, many avoiding eye contact. The usual grand entrances and ceremonial greetings were gone. In their place was a heavy silence, broken only by the soft hum of translation fields and the shuffle of feet. The vote that had once felt like a triumph now sat in their minds like a stone, cold, heavy, and impossible to ignore. Senator Cale Vore did not take his usual seat at the front. He stood near the back, arms folded, face unreadable. He had spent the last 3 days in the neutral zone, meeting with Daniel Hart aboard a small unarmed vessel halfway between Sol and Zenthar space. There had been no threats, no demands, just conversation. Hart had spoken of Earth's history not to excuse it, but to explain it. He talked about how humans had learned from their mistakes, how they had turned cities of smoke into forests of solar panels, how they had fed billions without war for over 50 years. Vore had listened, truly listened, for the first time. Now back in the chamber, a new motion was on the table. Not about Earth's membership, but about rewriting the entire charter of the Galactic Senate. The proposal came not from Earth, but from a coalition of younger delegates, some from insectoid hive worlds, others from aquatic colonies, even a few from former Zenthar allies. They called it the Accord of Shared Futures. Its core idea was simple. No species would be judged by its past alone. Membership would be based on present actions, mutual aid, and the willingness to grow. Chris Bell stood at the main podium, not as a lowly aide, but as Earth's newly appointed ambassador. His voice was calm, his posture steady. "We do not ask for special treatment," he said. "We ask for fairness. Earth will share its quantum shielding tech with any world that needs it to survive solar storms. We will send medical teams to colonies still suffering from the blight fever. We will open our neural link archives to help rebuild lost languages. But we will not join an alliance that sees weakness in compassion or chaos in change." He paused, then added, "Humanity does not want to rule. We want to help." A murmur moved through the chamber, not of doubt but of reflection. One delegate, a moss-skinned elder from the verdant reach, rose slowly. "My people once thought fire was destruction," she said through her translator. "Then we learned it could warm the young, cook food, forge tools. Perhaps we were wrong about humans too." Another voice followed, then another. The tide had turned. By midday the vote was called. This time the orbs lit up blue, not all of them, but enough. The accord passed. Earth was not just admitted, it was invited to help shape the new Senate. Back on Earth, people did not celebrate with fireworks or parades. They gathered in parks, in community centers, and quiet homes. They shared meals, told stories, and looked up at the stars with new eyes. The victory wasn't in being accepted. It was in being understood. Jake Ellis returned to the Proxima asteroid belt not as a lone miner, but as part of a joint human Zenthar survey team. His old rig, the Rust Bucket, now carried alien scientists who marveled at his knowledge of mineral veins and gravitational eddies. He taught them how to read the silent language of rocks. They taught him how to sing in harmonic resonance. Neither side spoke of the past. They built something new. Maya Ruiz flew her skimmer not just over New Oregon but over Senate colonies recovering from drought and disease. She delivered seeds engineered to grow in thin soil, water purifiers no bigger than a hand, and hope wrapped in simple kindness. Children waved as she passed. She waved back. No titles, no ranks. Just one person helping another. Frank Dawson retired for good this time. He moved to a small house on the coast of Maine, where the ocean met the sky in a clean, endless line. Every morning he walked the shore, picking up trash not because he had to, but because it was habit. One day a young girl asked him if he was a hero. He smiled and said, "No, I just did my part." Lisa Moore stayed aboard the Odyssey, now repurposed as a peace envoy vessel. She traveled between worlds, setting up communication relays that carried not just data but music, poetry, and children's laughter. She made sure every signal included a human voice, not to dominate but to connect. Daniel Hart did not take a seat in the new Senate Council. He returned to Earth and opened a school near the Rockies. He taught history, not the kind filled with battles and dates, but the kind that asked, what if we tried kindness instead? His students came from every continent, every background. Some even came from off-world exchange programs. They called him Captain out of respect, but he always corrected them. "Just Daniel," he'd say. On Varelli's Prime, Senator Vore stepped down from his post. He did not disappear. Instead, he joined a new initiative, the Bridge Project, designed to help species heal old wounds. He worked closely with Chris Bell, not as rivals, but as partners. They never spoke of the vote that started it all. They didn't need to. Their work said everything. The galaxy changed slowly, as all real change does. Trade routes opened not just for profit, but for sharing. Medical knowledge flowed freely. Art crossed species lines. And at the center of it all was Earth. Not as a leader, but as a friend. Years later, a young Zenthar student asked an old human teacher why Earth had not destroyed the Senate when it had the chance. The teacher looked out the window at a garden where alien and human children played together. "Because," he said, "the strongest thing we can do is not to break the world, but to help it heal." And in that quiet truth, the galaxy found its future, not in power, but in partnership. Not in fear, but in trust. The vote had been their final mistake. But for Earth, it was only the beginning of something far greater than any one world could build alone.